The black sedan had been parked across from the modest brick house in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, for 3 days straight. Muhammad Ali noticed it immediately as he stepped out of his Cadillac, his trained fighter's eyes catching every detail that seemed out of place in his quiet neighborhood. The man behind the wheel wore a cheap suit and sunglasses despite the overcast December afternoon in 1967. Ali's jaw tightened as he recognized the familiar pattern. Another government tale, another attempt to intimidate the heavyweight champion who had refused to fight in Vietnam. If you want to discover what really happened when the most famous athlete in the world faced off against the FBI, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story will shock you. As Ali walked toward his front door, keys jingling in his massive hands, the sedan door opened with a deliberate creak. Agent Robert Morrison stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the cold pavement. Morrison was a 20-year veteran of the Bureau, handpicked by J. Edgar Hoover himself to monitor what they called subversive elements in the civil rights movement. At 45, he had interrogated communist sympathizers, tracked Black Panthers, and built files on anyone who dared challenge the American war machine. "Mr. Clay," Morrison called out, deliberately using Ali's birth name, a calculated insult that made the champion's shoulders tense. Ali turned slowly, his 6'3" frame casting a long shadow across the winter lawn. His brown eyes, usually dancing with humor and confidence, now burned with controlled anger. "The name is Muhammad Ali," he said, his voice carrying the same power that had intimidated Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson. "And you've been sitting outside my house like some kind of stalker for 3 days. My neighbors are starting to talk." Morrison approached with the measured steps of a man accustomed to intimidating others. He pulled out a leather wallet, flashing his FBI credentials with practiced efficiency. "Agent Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like to have a word with you about your recent statements regarding military service." The December wind whipped through the bare oak trees lining the street, carrying the scent of wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Ali's breath formed small clouds as he spoke, his Louisville accent cutting through the cold air. "Man, you people just don't quit, do you? I already told your boss's boss, and probably his boss too. I ain't going to Vietnam to kill people I got no quarrel with." Morrison stepped closer, close enough that Ali could smell the stale coffee on his breath and see the small scar above his left eyebrow, probably from some long-ago bureau training exercise. "Mr. Clay, you seem to misunderstand the gravity of your situation. Draft evasion is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine." Ali's famous quick wit kicked in, but there was steel beneath the humor. "First of all, Agent Morrison, my name is Muhammad Ali. I changed it legally, just like Cassius Marcellus Clay Sr. changed his name from whatever his slave master called his family. Second, I ain't evading nothing. I'm standing right here in front of my own house, talking to a federal agent who's been harassing my family." The agent pulled out a small notebook, the kind used for official reports that would later find their way into thick FBI files. "Your refusal to report for induction constitutes a violation of the Selective Service Act. The Bureau has been monitoring your associations with known subversives, including your relationship with the Nation of Islam." Ali's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Subversives? Man, you mean American citizens exercising their constitutional right to practice their religion? Or are you talking about my right to speak out against a war that's killing poor boys, black and white, while rich kids get college deferments?" Morrison's pen moved across the notebook page, recording every word. The FBI had been building a case against Ali since his conversion to Islam in 1964, documenting his speeches, tracking his movements, and looking for any angle to destroy the most recognizable athlete in the world. "Your public statements have been inflammatory and potentially damaging to military morale. The Bureau has documented over 40 speeches where you've encouraged resistance to lawful military service. The front door of Ali's house opened, and his wife Belinda appeared, her face tight with worry. She had been watching from the window, recognizing the signs of another government confrontation. At 24, she had already learned to fear these unexpected visits from men in dark suits who treated her husband like a criminal for standing up for his beliefs. "Muhammad, is everything all right?" she called out, her voice carrying across the small front yard. Ali turned toward his wife, his expression softening for just a moment. "Everything's fine, baby. Just having a conversation with Agent Morrison here about the Constitution." He turned back to the FBI agent, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You want to know what's really subversive, Agent Morrison? It's sending 18-year-old kids to die in a jungle on the other side of the world for a cause they don't understand, while telling them they're fighting for freedom." Morrison continued writing, his bureaucratic mask never slipping. "The selective service system doesn't recognize religious objections from members of organizations the government considers potentially violent." Ali's hands clenched into fists, the same hands that had knocked out Sonny Liston with a phantom punch that nobody saw coming, the same hands that had pummeled Floyd Patterson into submission. But these fists remained at his sides, controlled by a discipline that went deeper than boxing training. Potentially violent. "Man, I'm a boxer. Violence is my profession, and I choose when and where to use it. Right now, I choose not to use it on some government agent who's too scared to fight his own battles." The agent looked up from his notebook, meeting Ali's intense stare. "Your trainer, Angelo Dundee, has been questioned about your activities. Your manager, Herbert Muhammad, is under surveillance. Even your sparring partners have been interviewed. The net is closing, Mr. Clay." Ali stepped forward, close enough that Morrison had to crane his neck to maintain eye contact. The champion's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Let me tell you something, Agent Morrison. I've been in the ring with killers, men who wanted to take my head off for 15 rounds. They faced down the meanest, toughest fighters in the world, and I ain't never backed down. You think some government bureaucrat in a cheap suit is going to scare me?" Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, where Ali assumed he carried a service weapon. The gesture wasn't lost on the champion, who had grown up in Louisville's West End, where young black men learned early to read the signs of potential violence from authority figures. "You reaching for something, Agent Morrison?" Ali asked, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Because if you are, you better make sure you can finish what you start. I didn't get to be heavyweight champion by backing down from fights." The agent's hand stopped, and he forced a thin smile. "No need for dramatics, Mr. Clay. I'm simply here to inform you that the Bureau will be monitoring your activities closely. Any attempt to flee the country or avoid prosecution will result in immediate arrest." Ali's laugh was genuine this time, the sound echoing off the houses in the quiet neighborhood. "Flee the country? Man, where am I going to go? I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. I got fights scheduled, training camps to run, and a family to support. Besides, this is my country too, even if you people keep trying to make me feel like I don't belong here." Morrison closed his notebook with a sharp snap. "The United States Army has been very clear about the consequences of your continued defiance. Your boxing license could be revoked. Your passport could be confiscated. Your ability to earn a living could be eliminated with a single phone call." The threat hung in the cold December air like smoke from the nearby chimneys. Ali's neighbors had begun to notice the confrontation, with curtains twitching in windows and a few brave souls stepping onto their porches to watch the heavyweight champion face down the FBI. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Agent Morrison?" Ali asked, his voice carrying the confidence that had made him famous around the world. "I fight my own battles. I don't hide behind badges and government authority. When I step in that ring, it's just me and my opponent. No backup, no weapons, no threats from Washington, just skill, courage, and conviction." Morrison turned to leave, then paused at his car door. "This isn't over, Mr. Clay. The Bureau has resources you can't imagine. We've brought down much more powerful men than you." Ali's response came quick and sharp, like the jab that had frustrated every opponent he'd ever faced. "Maybe so, Agent Morrison. But those men probably didn't have something I got, the truth on their side. And the truth has a way of surviving, even when the government tries to bury it. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now and hit that bell icon, because this confrontation is about to take a turn that will change everything. Comment below and let us know. Do you think Ali was right to stand up to the FBI? The FBI surveillance intensified over the following weeks, with agents now rotating shifts outside Ali's home in obvious black sedans that neighbors had begun calling the government parade. Agent Morrison returned every few days, each visit more aggressive than the last, as pressure from Washington mounted to find something, anything, that could be used to destroy the most famous, conscientious objector in American history. On a bitter January morning in 1968, Morrison arrived with backup, Agent Patricia Kellerman, a sharp-featured woman in her 30s who specialized in psychological pressure tactics. The Bureau had decided that a female agent might be more effective in rattling the champion, particularly given his public statements about protecting women and children from the violence of war. Ali was loading his training gear into his Cadillac when the two agents approached, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. He had been preparing to drive to his gym in Philadelphia, where Angelo Dundee was waiting to put him through a grueling workout designed to keep him sharp, despite the legal battles that threatened to end his career. "Mr. Clay," Agent Kellerman called out, her voice cutting through the morning's silence like a blade. "We need to discuss your upcoming trip to college campuses. The Bureau has information that you're planning to incite riots at several universities." Ali turned slowly, his eyes moving from Morrison to the new agent. He had learned to read people in the ring, where a fighter's intentions could be detected in the smallest facial expressions or body movements. Agent Kellerman radiated the kind of cold intelligence that made her more dangerous than Morrison's blunt intimidation tactics. "Lady, I don't know who's been feeding you information, but I speak at colleges because students want to hear the truth about this war. I talk about standing up for your principles, even when it costs you everything. If that's inciting riots, then maybe the problem isn't what I'm saying. Maybe the problem is what this government is doing." Kellerman pulled out a thick manila folder, the kind that contained surveillance photos and transcribed conversations. "We have recordings of your speeches at Howard University, UCLA, and Harvard. In each case, you encouraged young men to resist the draft. That's a federal crime, Mr. Clay." Ali's jaw tightened at the continued use of his birth name, but he kept his voice level. "My name is Muhammad Ali, and I encourage young men to think for themselves. I tell them that if they're going to fight and die, they should know what they're fighting and dying for. Is that illegal now in America?" Morrison stepped forward, emboldened by his partner's presence. "Your influence over young people makes you particularly dangerous. The Bureau estimates that your statements have directly contributed to a 15% increase in draft resistance among college-age men." The champion's laugh was sharp and bitter. 15%? Man, if I had that kind of influence, I'd be running for president instead of getting harassed by federal agents in my own driveway. Agent Kellerman opened the folder, revealing surveillance photographs of Ali at various speaking engagements. The images showed him addressing packed auditoriums, his hands raised in emphasis as he spoke to crowds of young faces. "These photographs document your systematic campaign to undermine American military efforts in Southeast Asia." Ali looked at the photos, seeing himself frozen in moments of passionate speech. In one image, he was addressing a crowd at Berkeley. His finger pointed skyward as he made a point about conscience and courage. In another, he was surrounded by students at Columbia, their faces rapt with attention as he spoke about the cost of standing up for your beliefs. You know what I see in these pictures, Agent Kellerman? Ali asked, his voice growing stronger. I see young Americans exercising their constitutional right to hear different perspectives. I see students who are smart enough to ask questions before they pick up rifles and march off to kill people they've never met. Kellerman's smile was cold and calculating. What you see doesn't matter, Mr. Clay. What matters is what a federal jury will see when these photographs are presented as evidence of your conspiracy to obstruct the Selective Service System. The front door of Ali's house opened again, and this time his mother, Odessa Clay, stepped onto the porch. At 56, she had raised her son to be proud and uncompromising, but she had also lived through decades of watching black men destroyed by white authority figures who used the law as a weapon. "Mohammed, baby, you come inside now," she called out, her voice carrying the authority that only a mother could wield. "These people got no business harassing you on your own property." Ali's expression softened as he looked toward his mother, but he didn't move. "It's okay, Mama. These agents were just leaving. They got what they came for, another chance to threaten an American citizen for speaking his mind." Morrison consulted his notebook, flipping through pages of documented conversations and surveillance reports. "Your mother's concern is understandable, Mr. Clay, but she should know that obstruction of justice charges could extend to family members who aid and abet criminal activity." The threat against his mother hit Ali like a physical blow, and for the first time in the conversation, his legendary composure cracked. His hands clenched into fists, and his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Agent Morrison, you just made a big mistake. You can threaten me all you want. I signed up for this fight when I refused to take that step forward, but you leave my family out of this." Kellerman sensed the shift in Ali's demeanor and moved to defuse the situation before it escalated beyond their control. "No one is threatening your family, Mr. Clay. Agent Morrison was simply explaining the legal ramifications of various actions." Ali stepped closer to Morrison, close enough that the agent could see the controlled fury in the champion's eyes. "Let me explain something to you, Agent Morrison. I've been fighting since I was 12 years old. I've taken punches from men who could break concrete with their bare hands. But if you threaten my mother again, you're going to discover that there's a big difference between Muhammad Ali, the public figure, and Muhammad Ali, the man protecting his family." Morrison's hand moved toward his jacket again, but this time Kellerman grabbed his wrist. She had read Ali's psychological profile and knew that the champion's protective instincts toward his family were his strongest motivation. Pushing that button could lead to an incident that would make Ali a martyr and turn public opinion even more strongly against the Bureau. "There's no need for this to escalate," Kellerman said, her voice taking on a more conciliatory tone. "We're simply doing our job, Mr. Clay. The Bureau has a responsibility to investigate potential threats to national security." Ali's laugh was harsh and bitter. "National security? Man, I'm a boxer from Louisville, Kentucky. I hit people for a living and I'm good at it. But I ain't never dropped a bomb on a village full of children. I ain't never burned down a forest with napalm. I ain't never sent 18-year-old boys to die in a war that nobody can explain. So tell me, Agent Kellerman, who's the real threat to national security?" The question hung in the cold January air as neighbors continued to watch from their windows and porches. Word had spread through the community that the heavyweight champion was being harassed by federal agents, and a small crowd had begun to gather at a respectful distance. Morrison closed his notebook with obvious frustration. "This conversation is being recorded, Mr. Clay. Everything you've said here today will be included in your federal file." Ali's smile was sharp and confident. "Good. Make sure you spell my name right. Muhammadali. And make sure you include this part too. I ain't gonna Vietnam. I ain't gonna kill people for a government that treats my people like second-class citizens. And I ain't going to be intimidated by federal agents who hide behind badges instead of standing up for what's right. Agent Kellerman gathered the surveillance photos and returned them to the manila folder. Your boxing license hearing is scheduled for next month, Mr. Clay. The New York State Athletic Commission will be reviewing your eligibility to continue fighting professionally. The threat was clear. The government was prepared to destroy Ali's career if he continued his resistance. Boxing was not just his profession. It was his identity, his art, and his primary means of supporting his family and his community. You know what, Agent Kellerman, Ali said, his voice carrying the confidence that had made him famous around the world. They can take away my license, they can take away my passport, they can even take away my freedom, but they can't take away my principles, and they can't take away the fact that I'm right about this war. As the two agents walked back to their sedan, Ali called out one final message that would be recorded in their official report and filed away in the growing federal case against him. Agent Morrison, Agent Kellerman, when this war is over and history judges who was right and who was wrong, remember this conversation. Remember that Muhammad Ali stood up for his beliefs when it cost him everything, and remember that you too were on the wrong side of history. The black sedan pulled away from the curb, but Ali knew they would be back. The FBI had made it clear that they would not stop until they had destroyed him, or he had surrendered his principles. As he watched the car disappear around the corner, he realized that the real fight of his life was just beginning. 3 months later, the government's campaign against Muhammad Ali had escalated beyond surveillance and intimidation. His boxing license had been revoked, his passport confiscated, and federal prosecutors had secured an indictment for draft evasion. But the FBI's psychological warfare continued, with Agent Morrison now making weekly visits that seemed designed to break down the champion's resolve through constant pressure. On a warm April morning in 1968, Morrison arrived with devastating news that would test Ali's commitment to his principles in ways that physical opponents never could. The agent carried a briefcase full of documents that represented the government's final attempt to force the champion's surrender through economic and social destruction. Ali was in his backyard, working through his morning routine of shadowboxing and calisthenics. Despite the legal battles that had consumed his life, he maintained the physical conditioning that had made him the most dominant heavyweight in boxing history. His movements were still fluid and precise, his hands still lightning fast as they cut through the spring air. "Mr. Clay," Morrison called out, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction that made Ali's skin crawl. "I have some documents you need to see." Ali continued his workout, throwing combinations at invisible opponents while sweat beaded on his forehead. "Agent Morrison, you're like a bad rash that just won't go away. What government harassment you got for me today?" Morrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "The Internal Revenue Service has completed their audit of your finances. It appears you owe the federal government $237,000 in back taxes and penalties." The number hit Ali like a heavyweight punch to the solar plexus. $237,000 represented more money than most Americans would see in a lifetime, and it was money he didn't have. The government had already frozen his boxing earnings and blocked his ability to fight professionally. 237,000. Ali stopped shadowboxing and turned to face the agent. "Man, how do I owe that kind of money when you people won't let me work?" Morrison's smile was thin and predatory. "The IRS has determined that certain deductions you claimed were inappropriate. Your charitable contributions to the Nation of Islam have been disallowed. Your travel expenses for speaking engagements have been reclassified as personal entertainment. Your training expenses have been deemed excessive." Ali wiped sweat from his forehead with a towel, his mind racing through the implications. The government was systematically destroying his financial foundation, using the tax code as a weapon to force his submission. "So, let me get this straight, Agent Morrison. You won't let me fight, which means I can't earn money. But I still owe the government money I can't pay because you won't let me work. That sound about right. Morrison pulled out another document, this one bearing the official seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. There's more, Mr. Clay. The Bureau has completed its investigation into your associates and financial supporters. Several individuals who have provided you with financial assistance are now under federal investigation for tax evasion and conspiracy. The threat was clear. Anyone who helped Ali financially would become a target of federal prosecution. The government was not content to destroy just the champion. They were prepared to destroy anyone who supported his resistance to the war. Ali's voice was quiet but steady. You people are something else. You can't break me, so now you're going after people who believe in what I'm fighting for. That's the American way, right, Agent Morrison? Destroy anyone who stands up for their principles. Morrison consulted his notes, savoring each detail of the government's comprehensive assault on Ali's life. Your speaking fees have also attracted federal attention. The Bureau has evidence that you've received payment for speeches that violated the terms of your bail agreement. Ali's laugh was bitter and sharp. Speaking fees. Man, I talk to college students about standing up for what you believe in. If that's a crime, then this country is in worse shape than I thought. The agent pulled out a surveillance photograph showing Ali addressing a crowd at the University of Michigan. This photograph was taken last month. You received $5,000 for this appearance, money that should have been reported to federal authorities monitoring your financial activities. Ali looked at the photograph, seeing himself frozen in a moment of passionate speech. He remembered that day clearly. Hundreds of students packed into an auditorium, their faces eager and attentive as he spoke about the cost of conscience and the importance of standing up for your beliefs, even when the whole world seemed against you. You know what I told those students, Agent Morrison? Ali asked, his voice growing stronger. I told them that freedom isn't free. I told them that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything you've worked for to maintain your integrity. I told them that a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. Morrison returned the photograph to his briefcase and pulled out another document. The Selective Service System has also requested that the Bureau investigate your claims of religious exemption. They believe your conversion to Islam was a calculated attempt to avoid military service. The accusation struck at the heart of Ali's identity and spiritual transformation. His conversion to Islam had been the defining moment of his adult life, changing not just his name, but his entire worldview and sense of purpose. My religion ain't no game, Agent Morrison, Ali said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. I didn't become a Muslim to avoid the draft. I became a Muslim because I found truth in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I found a faith that taught me to respect myself and my people. Morrison's pen moved across his notebook, recording every word for the federal file that had grown to over 300 pages. The Bureau's investigation has revealed that your religious practices are inconsistent with traditional Islamic beliefs. Your association with the Nation of Islam is considered by many Islamic scholars to be heretical. Ali stepped closer to the agent, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow across the smaller man. Agent Morrison, you're a government employee who probably never set foot in a mosque or opened a Quran. Don't lecture me about my religion. I pray 5 times a day. I study the teachings of Islam, and I try to live my life according to the principles of my faith. The agent looked up from his notebook, meeting Ali's intense stare. Your faith seems very convenient, Mr. Clay. It allows you to avoid military service while maintaining your status as a professional athlete. Ali's hands clenched into fists, the same hands that had knocked out Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson. But his voice remained controlled, powered by a discipline that went deeper than boxing training. Convenient? Man, my faith has cost me everything. I've lost my boxing license, my passport, millions of dollars in earnings, and my reputation with half the country. If this is convenient, I'd hate to see what inconvenient looks like." Morrison closed his notebook and prepared to deliver the final blow in the government's psychological assault. "The Justice Department has authorized me to make you an offer, Mr. Clay. Report for military induction, serve your 2 years in the Army, and all of these federal investigations will disappear. Your boxing license will be restored, your tax problems will be resolved, and you can return to your career." The offer hung in the spring air like smoke from a distant fire. It represented everything Ali had lost and everything he could regain with a single compromise of his principles. 2 years of military service in exchange for his freedom, his career, and his financial security. Ali was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of the government's final temptation. When he spoke, his voice carried the same confidence that had made him famous around the world. "Agent Morrison, let me tell you something. I've been offered a lot of things in my life: money, fame, easy fights, guaranteed victories. But I never took the easy way out, and I ain't starting now. You can keep your deal. I'd rather be broke and free than rich and compromised." Morrison's expression showed genuine surprise. He had been certain that the combination of financial pressure and legal threats would finally break the champion's resolve. "Mr. Clay, you need to understand the consequences of your decision. The federal government has unlimited resources and unlimited patience. We can make your life very difficult for a very long time." Ali's smile was confident and unshakable. "Agent Morrison, you still don't get it. You can take away my money, you can take away my career, you can even take away my freedom. But you can't take away my self-respect, and you can't make me do something I believe is wrong." As Morrison packed his briefcase and prepared to leave, Ali delivered one final message that would be recorded in the federal file and remembered long after the Vietnam War had ended. "Agent Morrison, when this is all over and history judges who was right and who was wrong, remember this: Muhammad Ali never backed down. Muhammad Ali never compromised his principles for money or comfort or safety, and Muhammad Ali was willing to sacrifice everything to stand up for what he believed was right." The agent walked away without responding, but Ali knew that the government's war against him was far from over. As he watched Morrison's car disappear around the corner, he realized that the hardest battles were still ahead. 2 years had passed since that first confrontation in Ali's driveway, and the government's campaign to destroy the heavyweight champion had reached its climax. In June of 1970, the Supreme Court would hear Ali's final appeal, but Agent Morrison had one last card to play in the FBI's psychological warfare against the most famous conscientious objector in American history. On a humid morning in Washington, D.C., Morrison requested a final meeting with Ali at the federal courthouse where the champion's fate would soon be decided. The agent had spent 24 months building a case that he believed would finally break Ali's resistance, but the boxer had emerged from every legal battle with his principles intact and his resolve stronger than ever. Ali arrived at the courthouse steps wearing a simple black suit, his presence drawing crowds of supporters and protesters who had gathered to witness this pivotal moment in American history. At 28, he was still in his athletic prime, but 2 years of legal battles and financial hardship had added lines around his eyes and a gravity to his demeanor that spoke of hard-won wisdom. Morrison was waiting inside the courthouse lobby, his briefcase containing what he believed was the final evidence needed to secure Ali's conviction and imprisonment. The agent had aged visibly during their 2-year confrontation, the stress of pursuing America's most popular athlete having taken its toll on his health and his career prospects within the Bureau. "Mr. Clay," Morrison said, his voice lacking the confidence that had characterized their earlier encounters. "I wanted to speak with you before the Supreme Court hearing." Ali turned to face the agent, his brown eyes still burning with the same intensity that had intimidated every opponent he had ever faced in the ring. "Agent Morrison, After all this time, you still can't get my name right. It's Muhammad Ali, and it's been Muhammad Ali for 6 years now. Morrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a final surveillance report. This one documenting Ali's activities during his forced exile from boxing. The Bureau has continued monitoring your activities, Mr. Clay. We've documented 47 speaking engagements at colleges and universities across the country. Ali's laugh was sharp and bitter. 47 speeches about standing up for your principles and refusing to compromise your beliefs. If that's a crime, then this country has lost its way completely. The agent consulted his notes, reading from reports that detailed every aspect of Ali's life during his legal battles. Your influence over young people has continued to grow despite your legal troubles. The Bureau estimates that your speeches have directly contributed to a 30% increase in draft resistance among college-age men. Ali stepped closer to Morrison, his 6'3" frame still imposing despite the weight of 2 years of legal and financial pressure. 30%? Agent Morrison, if young Americans are smart enough to question this war after hearing me speak, then maybe the problem isn't what I'm saying. Maybe the problem is the war itself. Morrison pulled out a thick manila folder containing surveillance photographs from Ali's recent speaking engagements. The images showed packed auditoriums, standing ovations, and crowds of young faces hanging on every word from the exiled champion. These photographs document your systematic campaign to undermine American military efforts, Morrison said, his voice carrying less conviction than it had 2 years earlier. The Justice Department believes they provide clear evidence of your conspiracy to obstruct the Selective Service system. Atish, Ali looked at the photographs, seeing himself frozen in moments of passionate speech about conscience, courage, and the cost of standing up for your beliefs. In one image, he was addressing a crowd at Yale, his hands raised in emphasis as he spoke about the importance of individual conscience over government authority. "You know what I see in these pictures, Agent Morrison?" Ali asked, his voice growing stronger. "I see young Americans who are brave enough to think for themselves. I see students who understand that blind obedience to authority isn't patriotism, it's cowardice." Morrison closed the folder and pulled out one final document, a letter bearing the official seal of the President of the United States. "The White House has authorized me to make you one final offer, Mr. Clay. Accept a non-combat role in the military, serve 6 months at a domestic base, and all charges against you will be dropped." The offer represented the government's final attempt to claim victory in their 2-year war against Ali. Even a symbolic surrender would allow them to declare that they had broken the champion's resistance and forced his submission to federal authority. Ali was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of the government's final temptation. When he spoke, his voice carried the same confidence that had made him the most recognizable athlete in the world. "Agent Morrison, you've been chasing me for 2 years, trying to break me down, trying to make me compromise my principles, but you still don't understand what this is really about." Morrison leaned forward, genuinely curious about Ali's perspective after their long confrontation. "Then explain it to me, Mr. Clay. Help me understand why you're willing to throw away everything you've worked for." Ali's smile was confident and unshakable, the same smile that had intimidated Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson. "Agent Morrison, this ain't about me throwing away what I've worked for. This is about me holding on to what I believe in. You can take away my boxing license, you can take away my passport, you can take away my money, but you can't take away my self-respect." The agent gathered his documents and prepared to leave, knowing that his 2-year campaign had failed to break the champion's resolve. "The Supreme Court will make the final decision, Mr. Clay, but regardless of their ruling, the Bureau will continue monitoring your activities." Ali's response came quick and sharp, like the jab that had frustrated every opponent he had ever faced. "You do that, Agent Morrison. Keep watching, keep documenting, keep building your files." But remember this, Muhammad Ali stood up for his principles when it cost him everything. And when history judges who was right and who was wrong about this war, Muhammad Ali will be on the right side. As Morrison walked away, Ali called out one final message that would be recorded in the federal file and remembered long after both men were gone. Agent Morrison, when young people ask their grandparents what they did during the Vietnam War, what are you going to tell them? That you spent 2 years trying to destroy a boxer who refused to kill people he had no quarrel with? That you used the power of the federal government to persecute an American citizen for standing up for his beliefs? The agent paused at the courthouse door, but didn't turn around. He had spent 2 years of his life trying to break Muhammad Ali, and he had failed completely. The champion had emerged from every legal battle with his principles intact and his influence stronger than ever. 3 weeks later, the Supreme Court would rule 8-0 in Ali's favor, overturning his conviction and vindicating his stand against the Vietnam War. Agent Morrison would be quietly transferred to a desk job in the Bureau's filing department. His career effectively ended by his failure to destroy the most famous, conscientious objector in American history. But on that humid morning in Washington, D.C., as Ali walked out of the federal courthouse and into the bright summer sunlight, he had already won the most important victory of his life. He had proven that an individual with courage and conviction could stand up to the full power of the federal government and emerge with his integrity intact. The crowd of supporters who had gathered outside the courthouse erupted in cheers as Ali appeared on the steps. Young people who had been inspired by his speeches, civil rights activists who understood the broader implications of his stand, and boxing fans who simply wanted to see their champion return to the ring. All of them recognized that they were witnessing a pivotal moment in American history. Ali raised his hands above his head in the victory gesture that had become his trademark. But this victory was different from any he had achieved in the boxing ring. This was a victory of principle over power, of individual conscience over government authority, of moral courage over political expedience. This incredible true story shows us that one person's courage can change the world. Muhammad Ali proved that standing up for your beliefs is worth any sacrifice. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for what's right, and let us know in the comments. What principles would you be willing to sacrifice everything to defend? Your answer might inspire someone else to find their own courage.